baby, you know I love you so good. Oh, baby. Oh, baby.
Sarah, thank you so much for coming on Rappahannock Radio today. Today we're going to talk about you as an artist and as an individual and how inseparable those two are for you. And we're going to talk about, in your art, you discuss and you show how you transform the energy of trauma that you've experienced throughout your life. And I want to start off and talk about that. Let's talk about your artwork.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on your show. I love this, and I'm just glad to be here, and really hope that we can, tap into. I know we will tap into something great here together, and
we will.
Let's see. So, what? Tell me your question again. You wanted me to.
So let's start off with in your images, especially the image that I shared for over and over again for the promo for this interview, the body of a woman with a severe scar, a very visible, very visceral scar down the front of her body. And so not only in that picture, but in other pieces that you've done, and I've seen you talk about it too in your stories and just from knowing you as an individual, how you, let's see, how do you put it? You like to midwife, like you're a midwife of energy and transformative energy, trying to change negative experiences into positive. And so I guess I want to start with how you've done that throughout your life, how you started doing that, what got you into that, how you developed that process.
Okay. Well, that's a great question. And thank you for asking me that. So
of course,
how that's, it really started, I barely survived my childhood. So that's where things began in terms of like me being a person who has had to lean very deeply into the imaginal realm for survival. And there has always been a brutality to life it was unavoidable. I was born into a certain brutality, and so deeply. Well, for example, like as a child, I grew up in an extremely alcoholic household. A lot of child abuse, pretty much every form of abuse that could occur. that the psychological field would say, like neglect or psychological trauma or sexual molestation or dealing with addiction as a child, addictive parents as a child, or things like that. All of these things were present, right? And so the violence was at an extreme always, and I've never felt safety, but in a way that thrusted me into at an extremely early age, because also I was thrusted into dissociative states. This is what happens when you're in trauma, you're in dissociative states. But as a very young child, I remember, and I was 7 years old, I remember it very clearly, like vividly, hiding in the bathroom, and from the violence that was occurring elsewhere in my house, and so it was like that was my hiding place because like nobody knew. I just worked.
Yeah.
And it was also the only room with a lock on the door, in that area of the house. So, and there was a mirror in there. And, I remember very clearly this one time hiding in there from the violence, and I had my hands over my ears like this, and I was sitting on, I was little, I was sitting on the vanity, with like my feet in the sink. Do you know what I mean? And like this close to the mirror.
Yeah.
And I was looking into my own eyes, and just like rocking back and forth. And I just said, and I do not know what compelled me to do this. It's a very odd thing, I think, for a young child to do. But I looked into my own eyes and I said, who are you and why are you here? Who are you and why are you here? I said this over and over and over again until like I dissolved. I literally dissolved into like my own eye. And this was, and I had a conscious, but it was conscious. It was not, so it was different from states of disassociation where there's fragmentation happening with your soul, right? Where you're in a disassociative state from extreme trauma, and you're actually leaving your system. And that is where, and a lot of people have to do a lot of work to come back from those fragmentations, and bring all of these threads back together from these different times in our lives, these different wounds. But it was interesting that I had that moment at that age of 7 years old where I actually was doing it consciously. It was as though I was
self-induced trance.
It was an integrated magic that was occurring, and yeah. I felt extremely guided by the subtle realm, and so it was a moment of initiation at a very young age. And I realized at that time that I could tap into, like, that you can be in multiple, you are in multiple realms as far as I can see from my perspective. And that the mastery then over time, over the lifetime, comes from, like how are we going to navigate the totality of our existence, the totality of our essence of what we are, which is divine, is supremely sacred, and it is profane and brutal and wretched all at once. And so that has been very much the theme of my life over and over again. So coming out of childhood, I was already drawn into this, into secret knowledges, really is what it was, and I didn't know it until, of course, later that these are secret knowledges. There are places, and of course, when my first blood came, when I started menstruating at a young age, at 10 years old, that was another point of initiation where I had this complex reality of being in an abusive school system, in an abusive religious framework. That was a Church of Christ school, and Catholic schools were the schools that I was forced to go to as a child. And those atmospheres they weren't healthy for, I guess, people who were being raised with those religions. But I wasn't being raised with those religions, but I was thrusted into those. And of course, so, getting my what I'm saying is there's only thousands and thousands of years of negative indoctrination towards, like, disempowering people with wombs from their blood. And most of that comes from and from their power, from our power. And most of that, of course, comes from, the way that occurs is through shame and abuse and anything that you can do.
Were you shamed? Were you shamed for at a young age there? So you said you attended Catholic school. You were
a Catholic school
they
before,
shamed you?
and then Church of Christ, a Church of Christ school, an extremely strict and narrow variety of
mindset
of that denomination. And so when I started my period and I was 10 years old, I was in the 5th grade, and I told my teacher, and she was like, she said, girls your age don't get their periods unless they're perverts or they're liars. So you're either perverted or you're lying. Which the implication there, of course, was that there's some sort of sexual reason that I started menstruating early or something, right?
Or that there's something wrong with you instead of this is a natural part of becoming, like you said, initiation into womanhood.
Exactly. And so that was a big thing for me because I remember being punished for my body doing a thing, and so, and now, I often paint with my menstrual blood. In fact, every single painting begins with it, starts with my blood. So
when did you start that practice? When did you start using, I see that you talk about you use some tears, sometimes other people's tears, sometimes, religious or ritual, not religious. Let's just throw that word out of there. Ritualistic or ceremonial, fire ash, burial ground, your blood.
Yeah. Well, so
when did you start utilizing these ritualistic practices in the physicality of your pieces?
Well, so Sean, can you stop doing that? I'm recording. Thank you. So I've always interacted with things, with materials, so I've always done art. That when people ask me I've always created things out of materials because that's what I do is I interact. I like to be in a relational dynamic. I like to be very mindful of the relational dynamics that are at play between the materials that I'm using or the people that are around, the energies, the sounds, all of it. So, but I didn't start actually really creating a lot of works where it's I'm creating all the time until later when I ended up facing cancer, which now is on the table all the time. But but whereas before I would create something here or there, you know what I'm saying? A point of initiation would happen, and it would give me this huge more of a purging, that would happen where it's I have to express a thing or expel a thing that's in me that's just occurred or whatever. So a lot of my the things that I would create as a child or through young adolescence or things after that were more like that. But then now the works that I create are more, but this is also because now I'm a grown woman and I've gone through all these initiations and I'm far more integrated with certain depths of I've gone really far down, really far with everything,
down the rabbit hole.
But now it's deeply enveloping. So the process has actually shifted, whereas before it was a lot of energy going outward as a process of an expression. Now it's not. It's an inward enveloping expansion, which is very indicative of the empathetic and transformative energetic and erotic principle of this deeply creative what people would identify as feminine energy, but that this is not a gender, of course. So it's the womb has wisdom, is, that we know that, and there are messages that emerge from the blood. So that's why I start with blood always now. And also, blood became much more important. So once I got, so it's been repeated at points of initiation. And here's the thing too, is that transformation and transformative process, as in terms of like, proceeding, continuing, and creating and evolving, this always comes as with sacrifice, initiation. I would say, from my perspective, and everybody's is different, this is just my cut, you know what I mean? It's like not like in the gospel, but I would say that we don't ever really proceed through initiation of the soul, of activation, in these ways that I'm kind of describing, these deeply transformative ways. We don't ever get that without sacrifice.
Right. I tend to agree with you. I think that's also why. Well, so I'm brought back to the description of you as a child asking, who am I and why am I here? And my background, obviously, totally different than your experience, but still, I felt always a sense of being very different and very alone in that originality. And as an artist myself, I know constantly asking myself that question as well, right? I think anybody who's in tune on a certain level of existence asks that, right? It's not just like, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to do this and do that and go to sleep. It's like, you're like, what is the ultimate purpose of existence? Whether, life is simply to exist, without questioning life, which I don't feel like is that for humans, just because we are so creative. But I guess what I'm saying is I used to question not only that, but like, why? Why is there so much pain? Why is there so much suffering? And why does it seem like, and watching my favorite artists, even throughout time, people who lived and died before I was born, Jim Morrison is an example of someone that I just love. But like these individuals, Kurt Cobain is another one, where it's just like, even if there are cases of trauma with them, and most of the times there's also a lot of self-inflicted trauma and a lot of pain. And you see artists oftentimes sacrificing bits of themselves in order to create these incredible pieces of music or artwork or whatever it is. And it seems like, going back to what you're saying, being very ritualistic and being a ritual woman yourself, in order to interact with the, in the multidimensional realm, you almost have to be giving, that energy. Like you said, you have to be sacrificing a bit of yourself in order to receive. Mm-hmm. It's like a strange, you know what I mean? Like that is the offering. Right. In order to have that spiritual experience, you have to offer up your pain, your sadness, your trauma, whatever it might be, so you can create. Does that seem like it resonates with what you're talking about?
Sure. Yeah. We're talking about contrast or conflict or trauma or challenge or pain. These are the things that are always like clay in the creator's hands, because you have to have material to work with, right? These are some of the foundational principles of, say, alchemy, where you do not, like, if you are to become adept at transmutation, you have to have something to transmute. You have to have something that you want to affect
Right.
change on. We don't want to affect change
And like these emotional
on,
contracts
we don't,
that you're talking about.
We're not thrusted into affecting change on realities that are already our dream come true. Like, you know what I mean? We were thrusted into a process of learning how to affect change on realities that must be changed because we will perish if they are not. And that is exactly.
Yes. And I love,
Yeah.
I was just going to say, and you're probably already about to beat me to it, but I just love how you talk about that. You're like, everything that I created, I had to create at that moment or I would die.
Exactly. Yes.
Like, it's so authentic and so real and so just an expression of who you are as a being, as a physical being, and as a soulful, emotional entity.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah. I find that to be very true, that, like I'm not an artist, and I will never be an artist because anybody has ever called me one. And when people do, I take that as a very nice, like, thank you for tipping your hat. And, I feel seen.
Why do you feel like you're not an artist though?
Well, because it just seems like there feels like a separation there or something like that. We live in a world that is very strange when it comes to like what is, there's a lot of privilege involved in who gets to be successful as an artist and who doesn't, and who gets to make a living off of being who they are and who doesn't. And that's a reality, when people ask me like, how did you become an artist? That is my answer, is that like, I'm not an artist because anybody has ever called me one. But I do think that I believe myself to be this way because everything that I've ever created was the result of like, if I did not make that, if I did not do that at that moment, I would have perished, So,
yeah.
And that's not necessarily survival, but it is. It's evolution,
Right. Do you want me to like stop this for a second? Do you need to?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
It's okay.
I just didn't know if he needed some like attention or if we should like bring him out and introduce him.
And Eloise is just sitting next to me. So, but it's great because they can listen to these conversations. We have conversations like this all the time. Eloise is also a very in tune artist and creative.
Yeah. I'm sure. How could they not be in tune, right? With you there to guide their hands.
Oh, and it's also
and their spirits through this
investigation. So like when you were speaking about that piece, I actually have it right here. That's a sketch. So just to kind of fast forward, because we can't tell every story and every trauma, but so I came through the childhood. There were points of initiation with that. In my early, my first years of college, there was a time when I was abducted off of the porch, actually, of a very popular college bar in my college town by a group of fraternity guys, and who actually took me back to my own home where I had roommates that were out of town. That it was on Thanksgiving, and and assaulted me, and it was brutal. And I nearly died on the floor of my own home. So that was a very brutal time. And I actually did fragment a little bit then. I did. I disassociated for a number of years. I was really struggling. I raged and flunked out of college that year, and like all these other things, but eventually I got through that. you know, and then later, well, here, I wanted to show this. I don't know where I was going with that. So, but it just was a very brutal and visceral. I remember the amount of times that I've actually been like on the floor in a pool of my own blood, or like literally having to scrape myself off of the floor from a beating or from a, like, you know, really weird. It's almost absurd for that amount of times of like being like belly to the ground, almost dead. But they're like, it's like, well, here we are again. Like death has come again. Death has come again. So, you know, what is it then that death really wants from me, and or is really asking of me? You know, and it's okay to hold it.
And it's interesting that you say that, because, and I'm sure that you have already met with yourself on this level many times over, but the fact that you have now decided to become, as you call it, a doula of death, a death doula, mm-hmm. or a midwife, from this realm into the next, you want to be there to help people have, and the families here have, a peaceful transition.
I'm trying to get it. It's okay. Keep going.
For you to be having this ongoing relationship with death and brutality, with trauma and blood, and to be painting those things, to be painting with your blood, really just brings home, or rings home, the idea to me that, like you said, you have this close relationship with trauma.
Yeah.
In a very different way than most people. You know, everybody has their own story, obviously, and like you said earlier, their own perspective, but yours,
sorry, I'm just trying to, like, it's blasting, the light came in, so, but it's okay.
Okay.
It's just like, keep going.
Do you want to do you want to?
No, it's okay. I'm following you.
So, having that relationship with death, is that when you decided to become, as you call it, a death doula?
Yeah.
Like, you know, when did that happen? Did it happen from your most recent? Let's talk about your recent experience of what you call a living
mm-hmm.
death.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a minute, and then transition mm-hmm. for me into this notion of what it means to be a death
mm-hmm.
doula.
Sure. So, in 2018, so not that long ago, so motherhood, of course, was another huge initiation. But then in 2018, my son was in 2nd grade, and that would have put Eloise in 1st or kindergarten. And things were happening within the school system that were not unlike what I had experienced. The compulsory education system is not for every child, that is for sure. And again, this is just my cut on it, is that I don't think it's good for childhood, how we have it organized and how we are approaching learning and how we are approaching childhood within the framework of compulsory education. And it only takes some time for folks to really dig into the true history of how compulsory education has even come to be. And we start to get to the roots of how genocidal it is to certain children, how deeply based in supremacy and brutal colonization, really. So
right.
It's time for us to stop clinging to the raft of like that is the best thing for children. That's
Yeah, there's not a lot of space held at all for mental health for children. It seems like that's totally being pushed out the window. I saw that a lot, and I'm sure you experienced it directly as a mom. I don't have a kid in school right now. He's too young for that. I plan on homeschooling him because I was homeschooled and because I agree with what you're saying. And that's not to say that, like, teachers aren't giving it their all, but they're abused in this relationship as well for many reasons.
Thank God the great educators are there. I mean,
Yes. But it's like it seems like people are more worried about a child's grade than if they're happy and healthy and mentally and physically safe.
Yeah, we
and
have
I think, just starting from that point on, you can just, you could embellish, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, we have to, face the reality that there are a number of children that cannot attend the school system, that cannot go to school because they will die if they do. We know this based off of statistics of bullying, suicide statistics, gun violence statistics, what is happening to kids who are neurodivergent, what is happening to kids who are queer in any way, what is happening to kids who, different intersectionalities. There are children that are, and a number of them, not just some, not just a few. There is a number of children who are not, their souls are not designed in a way where they will survive the school system. And this is something that has to be addressed by us. So, my family falls into that category. We had to leave the school system. We were forced out of the school system because of the effects that environment was having on, at that moment in time, my son. You cannot have a child in second grade come home and say things to you like, the world would be better if I was not a part of it. I don't want to live like this anymore. The struggles of even getting them in the door. There are some parents who understand this, that the massive struggle of just getting the child in the door, that it might have taken 2 hours to get them to stop having anxiety to the point of physical, breakdown. It's a big deal, and we have to stop blaming children. We have to stop saying, well, they'll just get over it, or they just have to learn how to go, or they just have to learn how to tolerate an environment that is intolerable to them, rather than looking at these souls and saying, stop disordering childhood and saying well, it's because, they're autistic, or it's because they're ADHD, or it's because they are this, or maybe it's because this fucking environment is hostile. And that's a big deal,
So you were your family was experiencing that, you said at the beginning of 2018. And what were you doing at that time?
So I was
you're a massage,
which was something that I was called to do at that time because of the struggles that my children were having with sensory things and sensitivity. And when you're a mother, you're paying attention to, or when you're a parent, you're paying attention to child development. You're watching, you're observing, and you are we do benchmarks. We want to know if shit's going normal. Guess what? It's not, but that's okay. But so I was starting to see, things, and we eventually started having to navigate through different diagnoses of autism spectrum, of things like that. And now we don't get too carried away with that anymore. But at first it was like a big part of my life where I was like trying to learn how to like navigate what this means, and like that there's really not a place for my kid, even like the special education, like all of the approaches that were happening. I mean, early intervention is very within the education system, especially for these things that I'm speaking on, is extremely important. And I needed it at that time, but we eventually got to a point where it wasn't evolving. The methodology was not evolving enough with the child, and so, but that's what pulled me into massage therapy, was that I was like, I want to learn how, like, there are things that I can do, with hands-on healing, with somatic emotional release, with proprioceptive input on the child, with sensory, like how I'm trying to help my kid not feel like they are dying in their own body, And so I was like, I'm going to learn as much as I can about mind-body medicine, about, massage therapy techniques and different modalities that people have had success healing from. So that's what called me into that. And then eventually, I became a single parent, and, I was glad that I got that skill, because I needed to, get like a job, like employment status. So this is another intersectional issue that we have with like the way that the world is structured right now, is that when you're a single parent, you have to, like, how much is achieved in order for you to stay alive for survival through employment status at a like establishment, an employment establishment. So like the fact that we have to access health care through employment status, or, these are big deals. That's a big deal. So anyways, needless to say, I found myself where I needed to be, in, like, the kids had to go to school. Like, I had to have somewhere to drop them off so that I could go to a job, so that I could keep health insurance that would pay for applied behavior analysis for childhood autism, or for autism, that would pay for occupational therapy, that would pay for, all of these things that my family needed in order to not, like, fucking die.
But then it's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, like that cycle of like, you have to go to work, they have to go to public school, right? Because you're a single mom, you can't afford to stay home and homeschool, you can't afford private school. So here you are, single mom, Knoxville, Tennessee, right? The never ending cycle of like, you've got to go to work, put them back into the system that is, quote unquote, harming them and, traumatizing them. And then, to continue so they can get these therapies.
Because that's the thing. That's
for having to go
you have to stay in the system in order for like you to access the things that won't kill you. But then it's also, that's what's killing you as well anyway. So, and this is very much where we are right now as a civilization, is that like we are realizing that the way that we are choosing to relate with with our existence and with each other is not sustainable. The way that we are relating with the earth is not sustainable. The way that we are relating with food is not sustainable. With our environment. I think, like you said, a lot of people realize that, especially with during COVID, as you would say, like the veil is totally pulled back, as in people are going, wait, why did I have to sit in my car for 2 hours to commute to a job so I can pay to get in my car for 2 hours to commute to a job, when it's like, and then, send my kids off and hope that it goes well. For a lot of them it does, for a lot of them it doesn't, a good portion it doesn't. But it's like interacting with your environment. And, a lot of people couldn't get, like you said, food, right? Because it's like, it's grown on, the opposite side of the country. There's nothing, people were going to the grocery store. There was nothing readily available because we don't have an sustainable urban permaculture system in place, right? So these are all things that as an individual you were feeling,
And at the same time, it's mirroring what was going on, with the larger universe.
Yes. And the time for change is very fucking nigh. Like, we've talked about this as well, right? Like, it's no longer enough to, like, acknowledge, like, one of the things that we saw, like, we need to be asking, I believe, and I really hope, like, that we do start doing this, like, the bigger questions. We need to get, like, good enough is not good enough. Good enough is not good enough.
Right.
Oh, well, like, for example, the food programs in schools, like, when COVID first hit, remember how terrified we were for our kids, all of these kids, where it's like the amount, it made us really have public conversations about the amount of children in our country who rely on the food programs at school in order to survive.
Right. They're going to starve.
Have food and not be hungry. Like, that's absurd. That is not something to congratulate ourselves on. And I'm sorry. Like, I'm not a negative woman. I'm a loving woman, but, like, I'm a mother, and the heart, the matriarch inside of my chest, in my heart, screams that it is not good enough. It is not time to pat ourselves on the back because we have a free and reduced lunch program. It is time for us to say it's unacceptable to need one in this society.
Right. And like you said, in your heart of hearts as a mother, as the head of household, as you say, single mother, head of household, you're looking at these systems that are really not in place to support a single parent, let alone a family, right? It's all, talk about trauma and, your particular trauma, but also the world's trauma, right? Societal trauma, being disassociated from different members, of your family, of society, and how we interact. So we're not a cohesive unit, right? We have to split ourselves up in order to operate in, on this system right now, in this system. So tell me a little bit about how you broke out of that system in 2018.
So that was the big thing. I just wanted to note, though, that, like, so it is, like, it's a conundrum, right? So it's like I need, like, in all reality, I really would benefit from having a public school system that my children can go to, because that gives me childcare. There's not another home that they go to every other weekend. There's not any other family members that are caring for them. It is me and them. That's the way it is. So if they don't have somewhere to be other than me, then I cannot be.
You don't have any time.
Then I can't be at a typical employment place. So this is where we start coming up with creative solutions and independent solutions, and creating a world that is more sustainable to who we are. And anyways, so what had happened was that we reached a point in our journey where it was no longer safe for my children to keep going back. That option was taken off the table. So, and this is what people need to understand, that I hope that we can have compassion with one another and start meeting each other. Like, I want to know people's stories. Like, how are some people making it? There are others. Like, what happens when you get to a point in the road where what you were doing is no longer an option? Because you or your family will perish if you go back. If you keep going in that direction, the possibility of you perishing is much higher than if you leave and risk it all and go in a direction of where you don't know what the fuck you're doing. You know what I mean? And there's nothing there. So that's where we found ourselves, where it's like I didn't know what to do. I was like, but I'm also a woman of very deep faith. When I say that, don't think of it, I don't have to explain this, I don't think, to, like, anybody that listens, any of your listeners or your community. But when I say I'm a woman of deep faith, I mean, I have deep faith in transformative process. I have deep faith in our ability as creators of realities, that we can make things, we can affect change to reality. We have so much more power than we've ever been led to believe. And right now is the time to be very in touch with our true authority. And for me, how I get in touch with my true authority and how I don't die is by creating. And so it's not surprising to me that we were like thrusted out, that options get ripped out from under us, because it's my existence's way of saying, bitch, you don't have a choice. Like, you don't have a choice. Like, you will, it's the warrior. It's what thrusts you into being the warrior.
Like sink or swim.
Yeah, it's what keeps you on that path, the warrior path, the path of continuing it's liberation is really what it is. Like, you don't get, you just don't, we talked about this sacrifice, you just don't get, there is no separation. And this is what I've learned from facing my mortality time and time again, and where mortality where my death is living. And this is where it has thrusted me into. So to understanding that there is no separation in the way that we think that there is, and in the way that certain ways of organizing
we've been taught,
and certain ways of organizing on this planet want us to believe that we are separate from whatever it is that we might as an individual conceive of divine or of divinity, that we are separate from each other, that we are separate from the earth, when in reality, whatever could possibly be divine, if you are contemplating it, it is you. There is no separation there. You know what I'm saying? You are the pontiff. You are the pontiff of possibility. Lest you would not be even alive.
Tell me more. Well, one, I want to see some of the pieces that you have beside you, and hold some of those up. But then tell me some more about,
to get us back,
your experience of living death.
Yeah. So when we left the school system, and that was right before we switched into 2018. So 2017 was like their last year in the school system, and then I was like, well, we're not going to be able to go back, obviously, right, kids? So we're going to have to figure out something else. And with that put me at a unique situation where I was like, well, I'm scared my kids are going to die if there's not another option here. So I had to start looking for other educational options, and we tried everything. Montessori wasn't a good fit because we couldn't afford it. Waldorf wasn't a good fit because we couldn't afford it, So here's where we're coming to see is that, like, the more gentle and the more appropriate, like, childhood learning environments for some kids they're not accessible. So I was finding myself very frustrated, but at the same time, at that time, I was doing okay financially because I had my own career. I had a house with a mortgage that I could afford, and was very close to paying it off. And at that time,
wow, that's incredible.
And like other things too, so anyways, so I thought to myself, I was like, well, at least I've got that's a nest egg. Like, I'm not sure, but I'm ready to take a leap, and I'm going to have to do something radically different in order to, sustain my family, and in order to make the changes that my children deserve, that I think they deserve, and that they require, and what I'm being called and asked to do. I'm a person who gets to the root of things. That's what radical means to me. And that is like the literal definition of radical, but
not the political radical.
But like to get to the root, right? We want to get to the root of something, and that's very much the way that I like to work, and because I have to, because I'm always on the ground anyway. So I was when I was facing that, the kids had just gotten out for summer, and I was like, I'm going to put in my 2 weeks notice because I have to. There's not anywhere else for them to go anyway. There's nowhere else for them to go. Like,
when you're like, I'm on the ground anyways.
I know.
You're like, I'm always connected. I'm always connected to the earth. I'm always in a pool of my own blood. I'm always on the ground, digging through the roots.
It's true.
You're like, I feed that root system,
it's
right?
True, man. I don't know. But and it's like, I wouldn't have it any other way because, I mean,
because how could you? How could, that's just the path, this is your, I know that this is one of your favorites here.
Fool. I love that because I am a holy fool, and I talk about that all the time because I'm a lover, very much a lover. I believe in love. I believe in love so deeply that nothing, not anything that I have faced could convince me that there is any other safety in this world other than love.
Nothing's gonna break you of that. That shows what a good and powerful, strong woman you are. You're like, I've been through some shit.
If we're not in love, sister, what the fuck are we even doing? If we are not doing in loving, if we are not navigating in love, to love, for love, from love, if we are not holding the multiplicities of the truths of our times, what the fuck are we even doing?
The light is like totally like you're glowing right now. Like as soon as you were like love, like it was like, shoo. And you are like, the stories that you tell of trauma is very much like Le Fou, right? I mean, you're like, there you are on the edge of the cliff, and it's like you're constantly like, are you gonna fall? Are you gonna jump? Are you gonna fall? Are you looking down at this beautiful vision, a place you're gonna go? You have a great vantage point there, but it's also frightening. And another thing that I love about the Fool that I feel like fits really well for you, Sarah, is that I can't remember where I read it, but one of the things that I read one time about the history of the Fool was that he's a prince from a different realm that came to, whatever realm we're talking about if in the world of the tarot, but be this one or a different one. But anyways, everybody just thinks, he's an idiot. Everybody just thinks that character is sort of just like bumbling through, but yet he has all this great wisdom and this great energy, this great power from this other realm that he's trying to show everybody. And that's how he does it, by making these traumatic, having these experiences, showing everybody that they're cathartic, that they're healing, that it's part of the journey of life. And I feel like, I don't know, that just fits really well when I think about you, is that like people are like, oh my God, Sarah, wow. And then you're like, but look, this is great wisdom I'm giving you. I'm using my own, I'm sacrificing my own experience as an individual so you can learn from that.
Well, and maybe or maybe not with that last bit that you said, but I'm at least like, I'm definitely a holy fool. Like I'm going off the edge. I'm gonna peg the void. Like I'm strapping on and I am pegging the void. Like, what we learn, right, through the progression of these initiations and the major arcana, if we're going to use that too as an archetype or as a journey of progression or of continuation, what we learn is that the Fool is the world, right? And very quickly after, what we learn as the Fool is that we are on the precipice, but it is choice. You're facing a choice, and should you choose to proceed on your journey in this manner, then you will quickly find that there is no turning back. There is no turning back. And what we find next is that we are the magician. And the magician is wonderful because now we're learning that we have all of the tools that we need to affect change on reality. We have all of the tools that we need. We are a lightning rod.
Yeah.
This is what the magician is, a lightning rod for affecting change on the reality. And that's a great...
And that very much is you.
Yeah, this is art. This is transformation. This is getting to work. This is, magic for me has certainly been a huge part of survival and continuation and thrival and saved my life. So and it's all about relational dynamics and learning how to be in relationship with subtle energy and how to be in relationship with everything. Everything is material for liberation.
Wow. That's an incredible, powerful mantra. Everything is material for liberation. I love that.
So to sort of
thank you for that.
Around to be,
yes, please do. I know I waylaid you.
On the precipice. No, very, very much. This gets me onto the precipice of here I am with these two kids. I had a job that I really loved. I was doing work that I really loved and that I was called into. I was asked into that field and into that space of laying hands on people, right? And doing laying hands, healing, and massage therapy because I was trying to answer a call as a mother to meet the needs of my own children. And I was like, well, once I stabilize my kids with this and I get results, how do I then extend that into the world more? Because that's the point, right? Is that how do we answer the call that our soul is continuously, the bell, it tolls for us and we have to pay the toll and answer the call. Some people don't, whatever, that's their journey, but I have to answer the call. And so that's what brought me into that. I was answering a call and then you answer the call and then you say, okay, I recognize the gift that this is. I recognize the change that this has affected for my life and in my family. How can I apply this now to the greater good? And that was how that got me into that field. And then once that, I had to start making lateral shifts with that because another challenge surfaced. Or a rug got pulled out from under us is kind of the way that we talk about it sometimes in my family, where it's like, well, okay, we don't have that anymore. That's gone, and so there is this becoming masters of letting things go as well is another theme that's emergent. But so when the rug got pulled out from under us of having an educational system to rely on, it was just kind of I was optimistic because like I said, I had a lot of resources at that time, in comparison to other times in my life and in comparison to maybe other people who might be also facing some of these similar challenges. So I thought to myself, well, what am I going to do? And being a person who gets to the root of it, I was like, it's going to have to be something big. I'm always going big or going home. You know what I mean? And so I was thinking, I was like, well, I mean, if we know that this is not a sustainable option, and it was not I want people to realize this. I had exhausted every option in order to stay in the school system. Therapy after therapy. I mean, it was a full-time job on top of a full-time job just to take this child to the amount of therapies that I was taking them to. And then to deconstruct the emotional trauma that being a person who realizes as a child that they are requiring so many therapies just to be able to exist a day inside of of an institution that we have as a society. So that was a whole lot of other work on top of that. So that was something that, you know, I had to face. I just had to be like, we just can't. Like, we can't stay here. I'm not needed here anymore. Okay, so that's a tool that I've used, a prayer that I've used. I'm not needed there anymore. There are people who are needed there because there are some people who are struggling there, but they're not dying there. And so this is where we have people who are doing reformation work or transforming the public education system in these ways. We were going to die if we stayed, so we were not supposed to be the transformative people in that arena yet. Now, eventually, once I get more of what we're doing rolling, the public schools are going to start inviting me and my kids to come in and help them transform the way that they are to help
operating.
Well, it's an application of empathy that we just haven't looked at. We haven't approached in a lot of our institutions. There's a way, if the institution exists, we can affect enough change on it to transform that, and that would be wonderful. But like, I can't do that right now, and I couldn't do it then because we had to leave it in order to not die from it. So, anyways, so that put us at that point where we're going to hit the road. I mean, I just was like, you know what? I'm going to have to find a way to have enough money to at least buy us a year or something, like, you know what I mean? Like, I was thinking more short term. So my thought process was like, how do I, you know, anticipating that I've now lost childcare and employment status, what then am I going to do to put myself into a position where I can be available to homeschool my children? You know, and so my thought was, I'm going to liquidate everything. I'm going to put the house up for sale. I'm going to liquidate everything. I'm going to get a mobile home, maybe convert a bus or something. And the idea is to make it a sustainable mobile living situation so that I would be able to travel with my kids, build community, not have mortgage, not have, you know what I mean? Your expenses change drastically when you design it in a way with a lot of thought and preparation. And so that was my idea, and I was going for it. I was really going for it. And it was slow to come on at first because I was being met with a lot of backlash from certain family members, and that was causing me a lot of like mud under my wheels, you know, literally like making me feel like I was losing a lot of traction. So anyways, but we started on small scale, and I was like, I'm still putting the house up for sale, and that was still the plan, right? And then by February, so about, you know, a little over half of the year into our first year of trying this, while we were traveling down south, we were visiting my mom in South Carolina. I got very, very ill suddenly, very suddenly. The kids and I and my mother were at the aquarium in South Carolina, and I was like, man, I'm just not feeling well. And I knew that it was something weird, very strange, because I could feel a change deep inside of me. But it felt like the flu. It felt like just something very, I felt severely anemic is what it felt like. And so I just was like, can we go home? Like, let's go back. It was on John's Island in South Carolina. So we went back, got back on the island from Charleston, and, you know, I could barely make it up the stairs into my mother's apartment there. And I looked at her and I said, I think I need to go and get checked. I think there's something urgent going on. This is not okay. And so I actually went back to Charleston, drove off the island back to Charleston, and went to the ER, and or I went to urgent care, and they looked at me like I was insane. They did a blood panel, and they were like, you're bleeding to death. You need a blood transfusion right now. So like you need to get to the hospital.
Oh my God.
And I was like, okay, well, I'll drive over there. Where is it? Give me the directions. They were like, you can't drive. Like, we cannot let you leave our site because like you need a blood transfusion, lady. And like, that's what they were telling me. And I was like, okay, so like, how much is the ambulance going to cost? It was my question, right? And these are questions that I think it's inhumane that we're asking ourselves.
Right. The last thing you need to worry about during a family health crisis is finances.
Yeah. So I was like, well, how much is that going to cost? And then they're like, we don't know. Like, fucking, we don't know. I was like, of course you don't know. I mean, why would you? Like,
like, never mind.
So I was like, well, I'm just going to call my mom to come and pick me up, but it's going to take like 35 or 45 minutes for her to get like here because they're on the island. But that's just going to be the way that's going to have to be, you guys. So, you know, and so that's what we did. And so I called my mom. I was like, hey, and she answered the phone. She's like, what's up? And I was like, well, I need a blood transfusion and can you and the kids come and pick me up? And so she did, and I get dropped off at the emergency room. I didn't, you know, they weren't letting anybody else in there with us because there was like a lot of flu stuff going on then, which I think could have been, you know, later than we found out 2 years later that there was like, then the pandemic hits, right? So it was interesting.
It could have been here earlier. Is this in 2019
it was in
or 2018?
But there was such a massive flu outbreak that they weren't letting anybody in the hospital other than the sick people. So, I mean, it was definitely weird. But, so that happened and, they gave me the blood transfusion and that was another point of initiation, you know, where I was like, something very big is happening right now. This is not usual. And, I remember laying, and we didn't know why I was requiring a blood transfusion. We knew I was bleeding internally somewhere. We didn't know why. Of course, there's many possibilities. But I remember laying there in the hospital and watching every single drop of the blood, of strangers' blood, coming down the tubes and dropping into my vein. And and it took like 10 hours for the whole thing to happen because I needed a almost complete blood transfusion. So your listeners who are like medical people, medical professionals, or that understand this, know that, you know, the human body maybe holds like six of these units of blood, these bags of blood. And I required 4.5.
Sarah, I just lost your video.
Oh,
it says video has been disabled due to internet quality issues.
Oh no, hang on.
I'm not sure what to do here. I guess yours is still recording. It says that your video is still recording. I don't know why this keeps happening to us. It's like,
okay, hang on.
Okay, you're back.
Am I back? Okay. So I think it was still recording.
You're back. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I think it was still recording, but just to sort of recap, people who are listening have healthcare professionals will know that, like, so I had to have 4.5 bags of this blood, and it takes, like, I think the human body, the nurses were telling me that the human body like has 6, so it was almost a complete blood transfusion. Once I got stabilized, they had to begin and initiating all of these, like a battery of tests, right? Like cameras down the throat, up the ass, like because we're trying to find out where am I bleeding from and why. But that moment was big, the moment with the blood transfusion, because there was an activation that happened in my soul again, with the blood, and with transformation. And, and that was a ritual, and it was a ritual. I didn't go to sleep even though I was exhausted, because I wanted, it was a prayer. It was a gratitude, moment for me, where I was thinking so deeply about the interconnectivity of all life and the profound, in fact, I'm getting a wave of emotion right now that's like almost overwhelming. The moments of watching this blood that didn't belong to me, that was just donated from who knows where, from, you know what I mean? The deep gratitude that I felt for not only the people who donate blood, that was possible, you know, and for being in a position where I was able to receive this transfusion, because I did have access to the hospital and things like that. That was, there was something changed in me even more profoundly than it ever had before, with regards to my understanding of being, of the interconnectivity of all life. So that ritual really activated using blood as a substance again for me. And it again brings me back to the blood. So, so I just wanted to you know, let people know about that a little bit, because it does have a lot to do with transformative process and interconnectivity becoming another theme of my artwork and of the way that I interact with things, and that's and the gratitude, the deep gratitude for the interconnectivity of all life, and in fact, I was very alone at that moment, because I was also thinking things like, what if this is something really big that we find out? You know, there was fear that was cropping up. But there was also this like overwhelming connection to all that is, and feeling like that for the first time, maybe in my whole life, I was feeling a special kind of sense of belonging to this like mystery blood, you know, that was, and I'm not sure how blood donation works for transfusion, like if that's just like one person's blood, or if there's like multiple people with the same blood type that go into that. I don't know. But anyways, I remember just being like, that this is the blood of like all of humanity, and it's getting dropped drop by drop by drop, like into my arm right now.
You were really feeling the connectivity.
Yeah, I was like, I now, and there's so much about like families of origin that there was a lot of wounding from my actual bloodline. You know what I mean? So, and abandonment is one of those things. And so then like this blood that didn't belong to anybody, it kind of felt like it belonged to everybody. And then it was getting integrated into my body to sustain my soul in this body and on this earth yet another day, like, was very profound. It was very profound.
Yeah, it's also sort of fascinating, the notion that, so you feeling that energetic flow, you know, the sangre, the blood, the life force, feeling like you belong. And then to think about also like that blood type, right? It has to be your specific blood type. So, I mean, there's an interesting, you know, intersectionality as you like to talk about, right? That you belong to a specific blood type. We all do. And what does it mean about the individuals? You know, it could be nothing, but it, you know, if you're someone who's really into tarot and the symbolic realm, it's like, what does it mean that you belong to a certain blood type? What do you share with those individuals?
Yeah.
You know, what kind of traumas, what kind of joys, what kind of, you know, successes do you share, you know, on some plane with the individuals who are then, you know, didn't know that you were going to receive the blood, but gave it willingly to save someone's life, regardless of who was going to receive it.
And what
that's
was
pretty
compelling
fascinating
them
as well.
to donate, blood at what compels people at different points in their lives. And so I was kind of tapping into that energy too, where I was like, I wonder, where, just where this came from. Like,
Yeah.
And then the process of also I was doing mind body work on myself, where I was integrating it into my body, because I'm like, anytime something that's not necessarily like of my blood bone or whatever, and then I'm like, I need to integrate that. So I was also integrating it into my mind, thinking of it as like kind of like this web of life coming into me, this fluid web of life, just kind of how I see blood anyways. It is webbish. It's very,
and welcoming it, right? You're here to do this, this healing job. I'm welcoming this energy in, instead of just being like, oh my God, rejecting the whole process. You were really, and that's probably one of the reasons, like you said, you wanted to stay awake. You wanted to be present for that ritual.
Very much I did.
So what did they?
Yeah. So then they searched and searched for about a week, and eventually found that I had a cancer tumor, a tumor that is cancer, a rare kind of cancer, growing on my small intestine. And again, for the mind body workers, in people who understand mind body medicine that are listening, where they found it on my small intestine was in the duodenum, directly under my stomach. And in mind body medicine, like in that knowledge, it is well known that the location was exact, like to a pinpoint. Like if you were to put a pin on a map of an exact place, where it was growing, where cancer was growing, was directly on my solar plexus, which is, your people would say your energetic center, or some, like Eastern, I think, uses chakra as like terminology for this type of thing. And chakra doesn't necessarily resonate with me, because I'm Western esoteric and mystical traditions are what resonate with me, and that's kind of like my avenue to things. But these go together beautifully, the Eastern and the Western. And so I think of them just more as like energy centers. This is the same thing, but and this correlates to your will to live the life that you want to live. It's like true authority and power rests here, and things like that. And so I found myself definitely thinking, very, very seriously about like, what does this mean that I've just committed to and embarked on this massive radical change in the way that we're going to live and go about living, and death has just come directly for my solar plexus.
That's quite the realization. And like symbolically, everything that comes with that whole, yeah.
And so and also there was a lot of fear going into the surgery, because like the surgeon and the doctor was like, they're like, you're really like a medical anomaly, because this type of cancer does not typically get found. I mean, only 5% of people with cancers, of all cancers, had this kind. So it was a very rare kind anyway. And then also, it's not normally, like hardly ever is it found in individuals that are less than, usually it's like not found until late 50s or early 60s, and it has already metastasized, and that's how they find it.
So that's huge. I mean, it's huge that they found it so early.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's good.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
good.
I mean, they were like, 'cause I was 34, I'm 39 now. Yeah. So they were like, this is crazy, like that to find this in a healthy 34-year-old, and it's not metastasized from what we can see yet at this moment. We think that it's only going to require surgery to remove it. And they ended up having to, but see, the surgery, when they went in, we didn't know that it was cancerous, that it was a cancer tumor when we went in. They knew that there was a growth there, but they were like, in order for us to know what this is, we would have to do an extremely invasive biopsy. That's like pretty dangerous to biopsy that area because of like there's like some major arteries and nerves right there that like, they're like, we have to go in no matter what, and it needs to come out no matter what. So we would rather just do the surgery to remove it than biopsy it to see if it needs to be removed. It needs to be removed. I was like, fucking get in there and cut it out. Like,
yeah, but it's like yet another time in your life where something is being thrust upon you, where you don't have, you don't have an option to be like,
there's no
I mean, why would you in this case? But still, like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's, of course you know what I mean, right? This is your experience. It's very personal to you, but it's like another time where Sarah's like, okay, all right, I'm here for it. I didn't necessarily.
Right. I mean, but you know what though? I have been praying for liberation since I was a child. Like, this must have been.
Do you think that this provided that this growth was like hanging around for a while, like just weighing on your psyche, but on your physicality as well? Like, do you feel that?
I think it's a lot of things because I think the solar plexus relationship, we are called, it's been my experience time and time again, that we will be called when we get our challenges, we are being called to face, they are going to rage fires so hot in the exact places where we must forge our strongest swords. For me, that is the solar plexus. Some people, it might be in the brain, or it might be a heart thing, or it might be whatever different other challenges. It could be your womb, it could be something else. Mine was, at that moment it was the solar plexus. So I took it as another time where my existence was asking me to fortify my true authority. I was being called into magic in a very visceral way. And to learn and understand, to ask myself the questions of what is your will? What is it that is your will? You are here to live and love on your own terms, and you must find a way. You must.
It's like back to the little girl, right? It's like, who am I and why am I here? So you really like you're inside of that iris now, like back to the little girl, like in the trance, in the iris, like
yeah,
pegging the void,
man.
There you are.
Yep.
And so obviously this like really ignited, like you say, these fires in you and these creative fires, right? So you started doing a lot of the pieces that you, the sketches and stuff. Do you have some of those to show us? Yes.
So
please.
When I was in the hospital recovering from the surgery, but not yet knowing whether or not I was going to need chemo or anything like that, so this was the beginning of that journey. When I was in the hospital, I remember, after emerging from the surgery, it was a major open abdominal surgery. So it went from, I have a scar that's like a massive centipede that stretches from my sternum to my navel. And of course they have to open the abdomen and remove a lot of things, set them on the table next to you, get the tumor out. The tumor was, of course, on my duodenum. This meant that they had to resect a portion of my small intestine, so cut actually a rather large portion because they wanted to make sure. And they also found that I had some reactive lymph nodes, so some lymph nodes were removed from the area as well. And then they have to put the two ends of the digestive tract back together, right? And then when you have less lymph nodes, your lymphatic system is forever changed. When you have a portion of your peristalsis is gone, your diet must change. Things like this. So there was a lot on the table there. And when they were going in, it was so close to my pancreas that they thought it might have been on my pancreas. So it was also an exploratory surgery. So they were like, the possibility of us having to remove a significant portion of your pancreas from what we can see at the size of this right now is pretty high. And that would have changed my anatomy profoundly. I mean, we're talking about profound changes in the body, of like an external element to help with like stool and everything like that. So these were the things that I knew going into this surgery. And it was, so that was a big deal. And then when we got done with the surgery, they felt very successful. So I had some hope, you know. They were like, we believe we got it all. It was not on the pancreas. It was on the small intestine. You know, and then you start getting the other statistics of like your mortality rating based off of the meiotic rate of the cancer, based off of the size of the tumor and all of these things. So, and they were like, you know, I mean, it's like 47% chance. I was like, 47% chance of surviving this or whatever. And they're like, yeah, kind of, pretty much. That's what we're saying. And I was like, I'm hearing 60% some odd chance of living. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm going to go with because I can work with that more. And mama needs some material to work with. But so
you're like, I don't accept that answer. I'm not taking anything but good news right now.
Also,
so
like,
you're just going to have to return that.
We can't orphan my children. Like, that's just not going to happen. So, but when I was...
So they gave you 47%?
Yeah. And like, it's supposed to each year go up, like each year in this like 5-year window, it's supposed to, your mortality rate gets better or whatever like that, but people, you know, people like me who face their mortality in these different ways, like we don't, it's like, it's always there. Our death is now living. This is what I mean by now we have a living death, is that we are facing off with the physical in a way that is not like, death is something that will come for us one day. Of course, we know that we are all mortal, but for some of us in this life, in this go or whatever, it is not something that will come later, you know, that we have time to plan for and all of these things or whatever. It's very much a part of our living daily life. Our death is living. We touch it every day. When the lymphatic system flares up and our body changes because of that or whatever after this type of a diagnosis, it's like we have to start thinking like, are we about, you know, is it possible that we're going to have to, am I going to light up the next time that we have a scan, or are they going to tell me that, you know, you're more alive now? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like another year with another clear scan or whatever. It's you live. It changes you. It changes you when when the rug gets pulled out from under you again. The mortality, the rug of your mortality gets pulled out from under you, and now you're like, you're navigating a living death. And so then the question becomes, how then do we do this in a way that matters? Because it's all that matters. And so to get back to the art with this is that when I was laying in the recovery room from that open abdominal surgery, I had like 47 staples, like upholstery staples. And I couldn't walk and I couldn't use the bathroom, I couldn't move. And I kept looking down at my body and like how my body was like, it was mutilated, you know? I mean, there was no, I mean, and this surgeon was actually very skilled. Like it was, you know, but like there was no way I was getting out of this without this massive scathing and without everything being different. And because it was so close to my sternum too, breathing was a very difficult thing. And when you have a surgery, you know, you have to blow into this thing that measures the pressure of your exhalations, right? Your lung capacity. And so this pulled me again into the mind body work of staying alive, and it became very visceral, and I was like barely able to have breath. And so now I'm at a ritual moment where I am making love to my ability to breathe, to making love to my capacity for breath. And like before, when I was making love to my capacity within blood, to my interconnectivity with blood, you know, where I was integrating that, now I'm integrating breath in a very visceral way. And I had to like it was brutal. It was so hard. It was very painful to breathe, very painful to breathe. But it transformed something in me, and it got me into breath work, and it got me into meditation in a way that I hadn't been doing it before. And I remember being I was in my hospital bed, and I had this one nurse, and he was amazing because he noticed that I was like sketching just with like hospital pens and on like this little notebook. And I'm like probably gonna cry thinking about him, because he came into work one day to check on me, and he was my nurse again, and he said, I noticed that you were sketching, and so I brought you a pad of art paper and some watercolors and some pens. And it was an 18 by 24 pad, and this is what started me on the collection that people see now on the works that I'm showing the world right now are all from this moment forward. And so this was the first one that I made. And so this is why a lot of them are 18 by 24 inches, because they're all from that same pad of paper. But this is the only one that I made when I was in the hospital.
Oh, yes. I love that piece. And I know you said you don't title your pieces, right? No,
but I'm going to go back and start doing that, I think. And so if you look at the wings, there's a raggedness to them. This is because this is where I was strengthening my breath and my lungs. This is where I put the watercolor paint down, and I used my straw from my ice chips and water, and I was blowing the paint, and that was strengthening my lungs. And it's how I healed myself. It's how I got my breath back.
It's literally a reflection of you healing.
This is all from my brain.
Wow. That's incredible, Sarah.
And then of course this emerged. So I never like draw out what I'm drawing. It emerges. It always becomes. And so that's what the breath asked me. That's what the breath asked me
to draw, to
bring forward. This is the same way. And then like later, when I got home after I was in the hospital, I got back to my mom's apartment, and then there was, of course, 3 more months of like physical recovery. And then in that time, I was learning how to approach my body again, now that it had been altered in a way that I couldn't, that was unfamiliar to me. It was gnarly, you know, it's gnarly now, not in the way like before. And it also was triggering because like, it's a scar, like more of like an injury scar, a surgery scar. And so like, you know, my body altering in childbirth was like something that I could handle and prepare for and like even, you know, and we get into, but my body changing, like the changes that had happened like in my early 20s from the severe beating of what happened with that assault, you know, and things like that. This triggered a little bit of that. You know what I'm saying? The grotesqueness of like of how do I get back into my body? How do I not abandon my body in this process?
It's so.
And that's when I drew this.
You bringing up. Yes, I love that piece.
And so you actually can see color on it. Like there's some green around the heart and like.
You know, when I shared that, Sarah, I had a lot of people reach out to me that, you know, were like, wow, she's really, really good. And it wasn't just like, they were like, oh, you know, like, that's nice. That's nicely done, you know, like physically. It was like your art, it transforms, you know, it does what it's doing to you, you know, it speaks to you first. And I think that's why, one of the reasons why people find it so pure is because, I mean, like it's interesting that you brought up the birth of your children and then this scar, because I really feel like this is like your birth scar. Like this is you giving birth to yourself, right? And it's also like a constant reminder of the inside, like the different realms, right? Because it's a scar that connects the outside to the inside. You're no longer just like, I mean, women deal with that constantly with the fact that we have a fold, right? The outside is connected to the inside and we have stuff that's moving out and, you know, right? We have that dynamic between the different worlds. But to have a scar visually, you know, where you can look down and see it all the time, it connects you to that inner world of yourself and everything beyond that.
Yes. Well, scar tissue is very informative. It has, much like the blood of the womb, messages. And we can speak to our scars and allow them to speak to us. And in my experience, it's been a little bit more of a whisper because you have to sort of like look at it differently. You're looking at your flesh differently. And what this scar has told me time and time again, when I've asked it, it says, it just whispers, you know, I ask it, I say, oh, you're a big one. You know, you're when death came directly for her solar plexus. And you know, what do you have to say today? And the scar whispers back to me, something happened here one day, that one day, and something else will happen tomorrow. And isn't that enough? Isn't that beautiful?
Wow.
You know?
That is beautiful.
And so that's very much, so that's very much what this is about. And, you know, and then of course there's like the distortions that were my personal style, because I'm self-taught. I don't know how to draw. I was taught how to draw in this process by some other, I don't know, maybe forces beyond or something. But the personal style that I've realized that has emerged with me is oftentimes it's headless or armless, or there is a bit of a southern grotesque quality to that. And especially with these sketches, because they were also done when I was healing in the low country, the deep south swamp, you know, and it was under a dark moon. So if you see in my sketches of the body studies, this was me like trying to relearn my body and things changing. And so these sketches of like these other spirits where we're like lightly dusted in form, you know.
So this grouping, so you don't name the individual pieces, but this series is called Lightly Dusted in Form.
Well, I actually called this grouping Kindred Shadows. Like,
ooh, I love that.
And so then there was like, it's a study of form and bondage and being cut and again,
what were you feeling in that one? Like, what was resonating with you in the bondage and that? Like, What were you working with, like,
Well,
emotionally?
actually, in this one, I was re-examining my body. I was re-examining safety. I was also re-examining a particular kind of eroticism as it applies to the concepts and the experiences of being, what it means to be held and free at the same time. And that in many ways we are so free that we can choose bondage.
Right. That comes with freedom, right? You can choose to be controlled as well. That's part of your
right.
free
and
will.
And the dynamics, of course, power and control and, like relief and challenge and pain and pleasure and the no separation, being thrust into a reality where there is no separation. The illusion of separation has been shattered, and what a gift that is. But it's fucking not easy,
Right.
So, but that's where
Yeah, everything that comes wrapped up with that.
I just was learning, how to just look at things differently and form differently and just trying to allow things to keep going. And I just kept being but that series of sketches, that was what I did when I was healing also in the Low Country. And they are informed from, there is some like spiritual energetic matter from, I think that John's Island, Charleston, and that area, and the swamp and the deep south and the blood in the roots and the colonization, the colonization.
There's a lot of trauma.
There's so much trauma. There's so much resilience. There's so much brutality to it, and the swamp, man. The swamp is it is gnarly. I was really resonating with it. I spent a lot of time sitting, amongst the cypress knees at the base of the cypress trees, those bumpy knobs that we see at the shores of the swamps, and watching.
It births a lot of life there too.
Sit
right?
on their gator boards in the sunshine, and just thinking about how the swamp, the swamp's energy and the Low Country, the energy of the Low Country is very enveloping. It's very womb-like, and it's gnarly. It's very gnarly, and it's brutal. It's a brutality to its beauty that was really resonating with me. And brutal beauty is perhaps maybe even what this whole collection could be called, but it is a huge theme. The multiplicity of the truth,
Yeah.
The multiplicity of truth, and speaking to our capacity as human beings to be profoundly everything all at once, and that we have capacity. You are worth more than you have ever been told. You have capacity. You are a multiple truth. And the time has arrived. You have arrived into the time to be it all at once. There's not a single aspect of ourselves or of each other that we actually have to abandon. Our capacity for loving and for transformation is so massively vast and can never be taken from us that we don't have to abandon anything.
That's true. These are words of wisdom. This is another reason why I find you very shamanic
Ooh.
You know, and again, I feel like just returning to the notion of the Fool and the idea that, like, I find it fascinating that you went through all of this, 18 months or so before the entire world had to live with the fact that they could die at any moment, you know? So to me, that shows, like, the healers, like, will emerge when the time is nigh. And as you've already, you know, we've already established that time is now, and many people feel that way. And so you undergoing this transformative journey before the rest of the world, you know, could meet you there, you know, at you know, because everybody has to meet you at the level that they have, you know, met themselves, right? So once everybody had gone, you know, through that in their own way, I feel like that makes your art so much, like, even more relevant, right? And the fact that you're emerging at this time. And so I just want to thank you for being, you know, a conduit of that energy and for sharing this story with us. And then also I want to do a little bit of promo. So you're talking about this year now, I know you don't take requests, right? You don't take commissions in the typical fashion, right? It would, it would be very personal, but you're also going to start doing prints. Are any of the prints that you showed us, are they going to be available for people to purchase? Are you thinking about having those or all new sets? Tell us about what you're working on.
Well, thank you for asking me that. And thank you for those kind things that you said. I really appreciate that. It means more than anything, because, like, literally this is all I'm good at. But
it's a hell of a thing to be good at.
I wanted to say that, you know, nobody has to meet me here or anywhere. I don't have anything to claim. A lot of people have been here before me, and there are many yet to come. And the only thing I have to claim is my process. And this is an invitation, me putting it to the world and putting it forward, putting anything forward, anything that I create or can do, is my invitation for you into your own process. And beyond my process, I have nothing to claim in this world. And so with that said, of course, I'm also back at square one with my journey. So, like, we are still trying to get on the road. We are still trying to get into a sustainable situation that is mobile. So I have a bit of a call to action if we have people that listen that are skilled at building things or know anybody that wants to donate to my family a bus that is, like, amazing working condition that could be converted, or an already great mobile sustainable living situation or anything like that. I'm open. I'm opening myself for community, because moving forward, you know, we're still at the same place. We did go back into the school system, you know, because the cancer ripped the rug out from under us, of doing what we initially had set out to do, which we were forced to do, right, by leaving the school system because it was dangerous for my kids. And then that, like, right, and then the cancer happened, and that forced me.
And you had to sell your house, right, to pay.
Yeah, I was trying to sell my house to pay for a sustainable mobile home for my kids and I to be able to live how we need to live to survive. And instead I had to liquidate everything, not to finance my dreams or vision, but to pay to stay alive within our medical system. So, and then of course it also thrusted me into seeking plant healing and many other things like that, which could be an entirely different conversation. But so I just wanted to say that I am at square one with, like, I only have so much savings left, and I'm still at the exact same intersections as I was when we first started homeschooling. And then so when the cancer came, it sent us back into the school system. And that was really, really hard. I grieved it. The kids grieved it. But then I was like, we're resilient. Let's try it, you know? And we moved to the city thinking that that would put me closer to resources, right, as a single parent. And now I'm renting because I sold everything so that I could liquidate and have a nest egg, right, of finances, which of course is a privilege compared to many. And, but that's all we had, you know? And eventually it's like, well, as soon as we got back into the school system, and my plan was to go back to massage therapy, right? Which would have been impossible in hindsight when you're fighting cancer on a physical level for your own life. And then you think about what it takes as a massage therapist in like an establishment. It's like I was doing like 10 massages a week to make a living.
Right. That's a lot of energy.
It's manual labor and emotional labor. And when you're already like, there are some days when you can't stop throwing up from cancer, or that your lymphatic system is completely awry, or whatever it is, you know, you might be grieving to a point that it's debilitating. So that would have been, it would have been something that I did, but it's like in order to survive and like get my career going again in that direction. But so the kids went back to school, and I'm like thinking, okay, we're gonna do this, only renting, and instead of being in the suburbs, we're gonna be in the city, and we're going to try this again. Like, this is all there is. I feel like I'm going back into the system that I know is poison and what's killing us. But I also almost died of this on like our journey, on the beginning of our journey in this direction. So I had to make lateral moves. We have to make lateral moves sometimes. And that was my lateral move. Well, literally, we re-mainstreamed back into public school in January. And 2 months later, in March, the pandemic hit, and the kids never went back that year. And the COVID response was so utterly disastrous that we could not. We were like, go return to normal, return to school. We have hope. We just gave up. We were like, we already knew this shit was not sustainable for us, at least, and like, we're not going to go back. I'm not going to re-mainstream my kids into something that was pushing one of them to a childhood suicide precipice. You know, I don't have to gut it out in this, is what I was thinking. Like, no, we're not going to send you back with all of the unknowns. We're not going to do that. I know that that's what a lot of people had to do. I respect it and I feel it. But for my family, we could not. I'm also, you know, considered immunocompromised, and what that at that moment, right, what that could have done, you know, and we didn't know a lot either, you know, about this when we first started back, when everybody's, but guess what the reality was, is that everybody was realizing the same things that I had realized when I initially set out on our journey before the pandemic, which was to find an alternative to learning, an alternative to living, was that everybody realized that, or so many, not everybody, but many realized, like, it's not sustainable for very long. Our kids can't stay home for very long, because if they stay home, we can't work. And if we can't work, we can't live.
So what did you do for work during that time?
Well, I had sold everything, remember? So everything that I was going to invest in my first year or two of living on the road in a sustainable situation and getting into that was spent on me surviving here. And now
so you had enough.
Yeah, and so now we're coming down to the wire again, right? Where it's like, I'm at square one again, right, except now I don't have anything to liquidate. And we're still at the exact same intersections that we were, only with a pandemic on top of it. So that's where, you know, I've had friends and stuff trying to encourage me to do like a GoFundMe to get into like a mobile home. Because the reality is that my kids and I we need to be mobile. We can't access land. Accessibility to land is another thing. It's not even ethical, I don't think right now anymore, for people to be trying to own land. Like, I can't get into all of that, but so we don't, you know what I'm saying, that we're again at that precipice where
you need to get out of the city. You need to get out of this scenario.
Well, I mean,
you're working
also,
on your way
in
out
order to
again.
sign another lease, you have to have, I mean, all of the rents keep going up. We know what's going on in this country, and in order to like get into another, like, what would be my next move? Get into a smaller place that costs even less? Like, well, maybe,
right.
But they won't let me sign another lease, like, if I don't have a income that I can show them. You need to have 3 months worth of, you know what I mean? This is where employment status, being an employee, or like having a income that can be gauged and predicted by the landlord, right? Like, in order to get into another, well, I don't
they
have
need to
that.
see
I cannot
that.
prove to them. It's like, because I'm like,
yeah.
I'm a living artist. Like, I don't have that to show you. It's like 1 month I might make money selling work. Another month I might not. So like, this is not, you know, so that's off the table,
yeah.
You know, when you don't have any capital for down payments or anything like that, that's off the table, you know, like,
but so you're going to work on you are going to sell prints, right? And you're
well,
selling them for much cheaper than they should be. Because
well, I might, but I'll have to hold off on that too, because the initial investment to get quality prints made is pretty high. So this is where, when people are like, you know, we do need to pay independent artists what they're worth, and we do need to listen to independent artists on and respect and admire what they're worth, what we are worth. And
yes.
So, you know, my paintings are all for sale, all of the originals right now. That first one that I showed you, actually, I think sold a few days ago. The blue angel one.
Yay.
My price points actually are, I sell my original paintings right now for $1 per square inch. So
that's extremely
cheap. Low. They were normally $3 per square inch, but right now they're $1. Why? Because I'm liquidating. I'm trying to get, all of my physical belongings have to go, because we have to get into, we're changing our life. We're back to our plan, to our dream. This should be a joyful thing. So that's what we're doing. We're not going to be, I can't, or else they're all going into storage, or maybe to be exhibited somewhere. But
so if somebody wants to buy one of your pieces, how can they contact you, Sarah?
Instagram is the best way to get in contact with me right now. I mean, honestly and truly, it is. I'm not on Facebook. Okay. I mean, I'm on Facebook, but it's only because the accounts are linked. Like, I don't track Facebook very well. So they can, if somebody wants to purchase something or talk to me about collaboration, or more about what my offerings are in death work.
Talk a little bit about that before we end here the interview. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about. Did you get into that at the same time?
Let me finish up this really quick. So like, for example, like an 18 by 24 inch original, which a lot of these would be at $1 per square inch. That's at $432, but I round that up to $444, and your shipping is included. These are all mounted and painted gold on the side. The frames, they're ready like to hang on your wall, and I use a beeswax to coat them, so it's very lustrous and a protective layer, you know. And these are like magical items too. I think, you know, people find that they change things in the room. Because they are made with substance. They are made in ritual, and they are not, you know what I'm saying? Like they affect change to their environment. That I specifically make them for that purpose, to change the subtle realms of things. And I think people love them, like when they get them, and what that huge one I hope will be, I have that one that's like it's like 8 feet tall and by 4 feet wide. And that one actually does have a title that's called Venus in Exaltation. And she needs a very special place. I would love to see somebody purchase her and that has a public space, because it's a huge statement piece. Like, could you imagine that being like on the wall somewhere public with
she needs to be on display.
She's here, y'all. Like, she needs a home. But yeah, I would say this is the time. Like, this is because they're normally $3 per square inch. Right now they're $1 per square inch. Next year they will be $6 per square inch, because my creations are only going to become more valuable because I have to live and I deserve to be here, and so do you. And
thank you.
So I encourage people to and I love, people who are listening that are from RAP. I've been to Rappahannock and a few times actually, and I love your community, and I believe us to all be a community. You're my community, I'm yours, and most of the listeners, I think that you are independent artists, and
they are, yes,
just beautiful, interesting, and eccentric souls. These are what we call kinfolk, and so
yes.
We're headed in the direction, I think, as a species where, community for some of us will be our survival. And that's where I'm at now, is we're building community. And I want to know you. I want to be known, and I want to know you. And it's a pleasure I'm just glad to be here. Oh, and the death work is something. So death doulaship is what people call this. I just got done being trained with the initial training process through a very well-known organization called the International End of Life Doula Association, to be a person who does doula work. So this is much like a person who would doula a birth, who would be a supportive service for doing the birth process, only for one's process into being born into their death. There are so many different ways to go about that. I don't really look at it so much like that. I call myself a death worker because I also work in artistic transformative process with people. So this is death work. My art is death work. I'm going to help you confront your grief. I'm going to hold your hand with it. We're going to create something. If you commission me, that's another thing that I'm starting this year, is that I'm available for commission. So somebody could DM me that they wanted me to commission me. And how I see that process going is that we would start a dialogue of an email. I would ask you some questions in an email, and you would answer them. Where we're going to go into a discovery process together of what it is that you're hoping to what do you feel invited into right now with me as a creator, and what are the emotions that you're working with right now that you're trying to explore, or the materials. So you could send me some things. Maybe it's your deceased grandmother's lipstick. Maybe it's a bottle of your tears. Maybe it's some dirt from a loved one's, burial site, or whatever. You could send me those, and I can make pigments with them, and we will see what emerges for you. And this is a highly personal and intuitive process. So, and it's involved. But there are people that will be called into that, it could be the ashes of, a relative or something. I've ground bone that I find in the forest before into pigmentations. And these things they have messages. They tell you who's there. They tell you who's there.
They speak.
Yes, they tell you who's there. So if that is a process of transformation that you feel guided into or curious about, that's something that you could DM me about. And in the future, I see this as being something that could be incorporated into home funerary process or ancestral veneration work, healing, transgenerational wounding, all kinds of things. There's mediumship involved in it, for sure. And, which is something that I don't always discuss like out loud, because we also live in this weird time of like this like new agey Instagram witchcraft and all of this stuff, like where these words like intuition and tarot and a lot of this is getting just like thrown around, you know what I mean? Like, and it can become very problematic, and people don't understand mediumship completely yet either. So,
it can become very, I don't know if the word secular is correct here, but like it takes, like the sacred can be easily taken out of it. And I think that's the danger of a lot of things. Yes. Yeah. Because as things become more mainstream and they do become selling points, there's a lot of sacred taken out of it, which is why another reason why I see someone like you who is really bound in the sacred realm. It's hard for you to put yourself out there in that way to commercialize yourself, because it is so personal and it is so sacred, and it's something that, you don't want to just equate to monetary value.
Right. Well, but also like we do have skills and crafts and,
that need to be shown in value. And right now we live, you're a material girl living in the material world. So you've got to get, earn what you deserve.
Yes. And
for these tools, for these skills that you've acquired and you're sharing with all of us.
For sure. Yeah. And what I wanted also to maybe mention to people who are listening is that, if you are a person who's drawn to finding somebody to work with in transformative processing, in any kind of spiritual work, I would say, you are the healer. You are the guru. You are the master. You are the fool and the world. And to know you is to love you. And anybody that is, and this is, I feel this is my responsibility to speak on just a little bit. Anybody who is selling to you that they will interpret your dream information for you, or that they will heal you by laying their hands on you, or that they will change your reality for you. Anybody that is coming at it from any angle in which they are trying to let you know that like they have something that you don't, you know what I mean, that's going to get you there, be wary of, because you have everything you need. You are everything, and anybody that is trying to disempower you in any way, or the work is it should be about reminding you of who you already are and going into a process of re-remembering your true authority, not ever to be, there should not be a separation there from your power and your authority of your own healer. You're the healer. Heal thyself. Like we are witnesses.
Sarah.
We are witnesses. We are not.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So,
thank you.
Yeah. And so it's all death work. It's all life work, back to life, back to death. Everything's good. And we're moving forward. And I love your community. I love what you're doing. I see what you're doing is answering a call to your community giving voice to and amplifying the lives and the story. And thank you for, saying, hi, Sarah, I see you and I know you exist. Tell me how it is, how this existence is treating you. And, this existence nurtures me and is ready to support me in every way. And I feel that we're moving forward. And I look forward to knowing you. I look forward to knowing people who are listening. I want to know what resonates with y'all. Comment on my things. Find me on Instagram, which Kiaya will, of course.
Yeah, I'll tag you. I'll tag you in the post.
Yeah. And I look forward to hearing from you. I want to know about, tell me about it. How's your mom and them?
Thank you so much for coming on Rappahannock Radio today and sharing your story with me and with everybody listening. And I look forward to watching your journey and to seeing you grow in every direction that you are and that you should. And I love you
too, sweetheart. It's great talking to you. Thank you.
You too. Take care.
See you soon.
Oh, baby, you know I love you so good. Oh, baby.